have no problem, but I don't trust President Trump as far as I can throw him. He constantly changes his mind. It's you just don't know who you're dealing with.
Well, Alberta separation continues to be a hot issue in the province and seems destined for a citizen-led referendum.
While the United States finalizes new trade deals with Japan and the European Union, cutting tariffs and expanding strategic cooperation, only one name is left out in the cold. Canada, no tariff relief, no breakthrough agreement, no voice at the table. For provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, the silence from Washington isn't nearly as painful as the indifference coming from their own capital, Ottawa. In their eyes, Canada is now nothing more than a name, hollow and disconnected. And if nothing changes, they may be the first to walk away from the federation they once helped build. Alberta and Saskatchewan have had enough. As the economic workhorses of Canada, especially in oil and gas, they've been treated like Ottawa's ATM, constantly contributing but rarely consulted.
We will only sign a deal that's the right deal, that's a good deal for Canada. We're representing Canada, we're standing up for Canada. The United States and Canada can do many good things together.
When the U.S. offered the EU and Japan tariff deals as low as 15%, Canadian exports still faced a looming 35% rate, especially on critical goods like automobiles, steel, and softwood lumber. For Alberta, which accounts for over 70% of Canada's oil production, it's not just unfair, it's strangling. And what's worse, Ottawa is silent. Alberta recently passed the Sovereignty Act, granting the province power to ignore federal laws deemed harmful. Another bill lowered the threshold for triggering a referendum from 640,000 signatures to just 177,000.
I take that seriously, and I hope that the federal government takes that seriously.
Smith believes separatist sentiments were created by Ottawa. She argues it's up to the federal government to fix it, pitching proposals like coast-to-coast oil and gas shipping access.
While the government hasn't officially announced a vote, the Alberta Prosperity Project claims to have collected over 250,000 signatures. Verified or not, the message is crystal clear. If Ottawa won't listen, Alberta will speak for itself. Meanwhile, Saskatchewan hasn't gone as far, but the winds of change are stirring. Talk of greater autonomy is getting louder. Western businesses are growing impatient. More companies in energy, logistics, and construction are relocating to U.S. border states like Montana and North Dakota. A CEO in Calgary put it bluntly, "We're already operating like we're part of the U.S. economy. Ottawa just makes things harder."
Industry, businesses, Canadians, they are anxious and they are concerned. They don't deserve the uncertainty that's been thrust upon them.
The reality? Without any formal declaration, Alberta and Saskatchewan are already behaving like sovereign economies. They're not waiting for Ottawa's permission, they're finding ways to survive. Canada won't break apart in a civil war. It'll erode quietly, from indifference and distrust. When one side pleads for action and the other offers empty debates and delayed negotiations, collapse becomes inevitable. Worse still, the trade deals Ottawa once hoped to secure are slipping away. The U.S. is finalizing preferential terms with major economies, while Canada, its closest neighbor, is being labeled difficult, non-priority, and even not worth negotiating with. One day the name Canada may still exist on a map, but its heart, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the western soul that drove its prosperity may no longer beat in unison. There will be no explosions, no sudden border lines. The loudest sound will be the quiet slam of doors from people who once called Ottawa their nation's center. And by the time the federal government realizes what's been lost, it may be too late. Because sometimes a province doesn't leave simply out of rebellion, but because no one ever fought hard enough to make them stay.
We had a meeting. I wasn't sure. I said 50-50. I think you probably felt the same thing.
Just 1 hour. That's all it took for the President of the United States to go from calling a trade deal with the European Union a 50-50 chance to walking onto a stage and announcing the biggest trade deal ever made. This pattern isn't new.
I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs, not really a negotiation.
Days before, Trump used the same tactic with Canada, telling reporters there might be no deal at all and that Ottawa might have to just pay tariffs. Then, almost like clockwork, he flipped the script with Europe, moving from doubt to triumph within hours. It's less about negotiation at the table and more about building suspense for a dramatic reveal. From the outside, this might look like strength, but it's also carefully staged. Much of the real bargaining happens behind closed doors, while the public announcements are crafted to create headlines. For countries like Canada, this raises a critical question. If others are signing just to escape tariffs, should Canada resist this pattern and hold out for something more substantial? What Trump calls a deal is often just a framework, broad outlines without binding details. There are no published timelines, no enforcement mechanisms, and no clear terms on what happens if a partner country fails to deliver on its promises. This ambiguity gives Trump the power to redefine the terms at any moment, even after the handshake and the cameras are gone. It's a political advantage, but it leaves trading partners exposed. For Canada, this is both a warning and an opportunity. Instead of rushing to mimic what Japan or Europe accepted, Ottawa could push for stronger, enforceable terms, a real agreement that won't shift with the president's next press conference.
Well, the bottom line is that the American people are going to be paying a 15% tax on any imports from the world's second largest collective economy, and that's the European Union. That is not a good thing for American consumers.
Behind the showmanship, someone has to pay, and that someone is the American consumer. The 15% tariff on EU imports, announced with great fanfare, applies broadly, with limited exceptions for pharmaceuticals. Steel and aluminum imports still face 50% tariffs. For everything else, the price goes up. Businesses that rely on European parts, machinery, or raw materials now face higher costs, which will inevitably flow down to consumers. Whether it's auto components from Germany or specialty foods from Italy, the checkout price in American stores is climbing. The ripple effects go even further. U.S. small businesses that assemble imported goods or use European inputs in manufacturing will be hit the hardest. Unlike multinationals, they have limited ability to absorb cost increases or reconfigure supply chains. For many, this means slowing hiring, cutting hours, or passing costs directly to customers. In a fragile inflationary environment, these hidden taxes could undercut household budgets and business confidence alike. Meanwhile, the much-hyped benefits, like $600 billion in European investments or $750 billion in energy purchases, are vague and spread over years. There's no guarantee how much of that will create jobs or lower prices for ordinary Americans. In the short term, it's a tax disguised as a trade victory. This is where Canada might find leverage. By aligning with U.S. industries that depend on cross-border trade, such as auto manufacturers in Michigan or food processors in Wisconsin, Canada can highlight how tariffs hurt both economies.
We will, obviously, we're working on behalf of Canadians, and we will agree a deal if there's one on the table that is in the best interest of Canadians, just as the United States will do, and we'll use all the time that's necessary. And agree something that's in the interest of Canadians, if that's available.
The urge to sign a quick deal is understandable. No country wants to face 25% or 35% tariffs. But speed is not the same as substance. Trump's pattern of declaring no deal and then staging a victory is powerful media theater. Yet Canada doesn't have to play along. A slower, more deliberate path could secure terms that truly protect Canadian businesses while avoiding the hollow optics that others have settled for. In trade, as in politics, it's not about who signs first, it's about who walks away with something real.
Quebec City has canceled the show of American musician Sean Foyt. The singer is a prominent figure in the MAGA movement, which has created problems on his North American tour.
In late July 2025, multiple Canadian cities quietly made the same decision, and it sent a loud message. Quebec City, Charlottetown, Moncton, and Halifax all revoked performance permits for Sean Foyt, a musician and vocal MAGA supporter. The stated reason was public safety. Local authorities cited security concerns after hearing from residents and community groups. Foyt was scheduled to perform at Expo Cité in Quebec City on July 25th. But the venue, owned by the city, canceled the show after learning of the artist's political ties. He's closely aligned with Donald Trump's inner circle and has publicly opposed abortion and LGBTQ+ rights. No riots, no shouting matches. Just a quiet decision made through administrative process backed by strong local sentiment.
Elected politicians.
Elbows up! It's elbows up time. We will never kiss the gangster's ring.
This wasn't the result of a nationwide campaign or a coordinated protest. It wasn't even officially tied to the elbows up movement. But for those watching closely, the fingerprints were unmistakable. Elbows Up emerged earlier this year as Canada's signature cultural response to Donald Trump's aggressive trade tactics and political rhetoric. It's not about confrontation. It's about silent resistance. Not slamming fists on the table, but raising an elbow, firm, unshaken, and unmistakably clear. The cancellation of Foicht's concerts didn't cite this movement, yet the tone matched perfectly. No need to chant. No need to clash. Just quietly say, not here.
Foicht is closely aligned with Trump allies. The news comes after mounting pressure from opposition parties in Quebec City and community groups who promised to protest outside the venue.
To understand why this reaction resonates, you have to look at the broader context. Since his return to the White House, President Trump has reintroduced steep tariffs, 25% on most Canadian goods, and even floated the idea of Canada becoming America's 51st state. These statements, layered with trade threats and economic pressure, sparked a cultural backlash north of the border. Canadians didn't respond with boycotts or political stunts. They responded through everyday choices, refusing to host, refusing to platform, refusing to bend. In that sense, Sean Foicht's tour became a mirror, not just of American conservatism, but of how Canada chooses to draw its own lines. Importantly, this wasn't cancel culture in the American sense. There were no mass social media campaigns, no national bans. Each decision was local and procedural. City officials acted within their rights. Parks Canada in Halifax, for example, withdrew event permits due to safety assessments, not ideology. This wasn't about silencing religious voices. It was about maintaining public trust and safety in shared spaces. The same communities that celebrate Pride also chose not to endorse what they saw as a politicized form of worship. Today, Elbows Up is no longer trending online, but its ethos continues to shape Canada's cultural identity. When Trump imposes tariffs, Canada doesn't shout. It invests in domestic resilience. When MAGA-linked performers arrive, Canadians don't clash. They quietly close the door. Prime Minister Mark Carney hasn't made bold statements about this incident. He doesn't need to. The response is already written. In the cancelled contracts, the calm city statements, and the collective understanding that some messages just don't belong. This quiet resistance works. It takes the stage away from MAGA, not by shouting, but by saying nothing at all. As more Canadians turn to local music, art, and media, they're creating their own culture, one that doesn't need approval from Washington. It's not cancel culture. It's Canada choosing its own voice. While Trump governs through pressure, Canada responds with posture. And in this case, all it took was a few cancelled concerts to remind the world, not all resistance is loud. Sometimes it's just an elbow, raised firmly, held steadily, saying everything without a single word,